Here at Visualpolitik, we're not exactly massive fans of Donald Trump, as viewers of our Spanish language channel will know particularly. However, there is one area where we must admit that Donald Trump is absolutely correct.
If you want to be a citizen of Mexico, and let's assume you're a perfect person, okay? You could not become a citizen of Mexico. It's the hardest place just about in the country, in the world, to become a citizen of.
But in this case, Donald Trump is telling the truth. Mexico has an immigration policy that is way more restrictive than the American one. To understand this better, in 2015, the Mexican government kicked out of its country 100,000 foreigners, while its neighbor to the north kicked out 300,000. Okay, so actually on the face of things, it looks as if the US deports more people than Mexico, right? I mean, 300,000 versus 100,000. But you really must think about this in relative terms. For one, Mexico's population is 3 times smaller than the United States, and it's also a far less attractive destination for immigrants. That said, we can say that the Mexican authorities deport nearly everyone who crosses into the country through their southern border with Belize and Guatemala. That is, they deport all of the people who decide to stay in Mexico rather than heading further north to the United States. In fact, while America has an immigrant population of 14%, which is, by the way, average in terms of developed countries, Mexico has an immigrant population of just 1%. In fact, while the Mexican president, Enrique Peña Nieto, was saying this to Donald Trump,
"Los mexicanos en Estados Unidos son gente honesta y
Mexicans living in US are honest, hardworking people. They are good people. They respect family. They respect their communities, and they deserve respect.
Como tal, los mexicanos merecen el respeto de todos."
48% of the Mexican population holds a negative or very negative opinion about immigrants from Central America. In fact, in 2016, a Mexican newspaper called La Mañana published the following.
Yes to the border wall, but in the south of Mexico, the problems between the US and Mexico can be solved by building a border like the one proposed by Donald Trump, but in the south, so we can keep illegal aliens out of Central America.
It's all rather interesting, right? And that's why in today's Visualpolitik video, we're going to be looking into Mexico's immigration policy.
Why does Mexico deport Central American immigrants?
The first thing that we need to understand before talking about immigration to Mexico is their geographical location. Let's imagine that you live in Nicaragua and you want to move to the United States. Let's also say that you have no money to purchase a plane ticket. In this case, the only way for you to get from Nicaragua to the United States is by land, and that means going through Mexico. Currently, the biggest flow of immigrants in the world is from Central America to the United States of America. In 2015 alone, over 22 million people made this trip. It's an extremely dangerous journey on roads that are in terrible condition, and immigrants also pass through some incredibly violent areas. And don't forget Mexican states like Chiapas, Guerrero, and Sinaloa are hotspots for drug trafficking.
Porque sufren todos los abusos posibles.
They suffer all kinds of abuses: extortion, kidnapping, human trafficking, drug trafficking, human and sexual slavery.
Explotación laboral y sexual.
To understand this better, when some of the immigrants arrive in the south of Mexico, they have to continue their journey to the US on the roof of a train. This train has become known as the Beast or the Death Train, and it's not hard to figure out why.
This is why some immigrants decide to stay in Mexico.
This situation was the perfect excuse for the Mexican government to pass the Ley de Populación, or population law. This was passed in the mid-1970s. The law was partly put into place in order to restrict the flow of immigrants to the country in order to avoid human trafficking and abuse. So this sounds like a well-intentioned law. So what exactly was the problem here? Well, what at first appeared to be something good for foreigners quickly became hell for them. And now you might be wondering what exactly made this law quite so bad for immigrants. Well, quite simply, it gave the government the power to expel foreigners for reasons as ludicrous as this one.
The secretary can deny foreigners entrance to the country or change the quality or characteristics of the migration in order to keep a demographic balance.
In other words, Mexico only wants immigrants from wealthy countries. And if possible, it's better if their skin is white. And well, what's the result of all this? Well, it turns out that 7 out of every 10 immigrants to Mexico are from the United States. And what about the rest of them? What about that other 3? Well, they're mostly from Spain. In fact, Mexican has twice as many Spaniards living in it as it does Guatemalans. Now, this wouldn't exactly be a big surprise, except for the fact that Guatemala shares a border with Mexico, and Spain is thousands of miles away across an ocean. But this is not all. Mexico has an equal number of German immigrants as it does Peruvians. So, if you come from Europe or the United States, you're going to have no problem getting a visa for Mexico. Apparently, you're helping to improve that demographic balance. But if you happen to be from Peru and want to live in the country of Robert Rodriguez, well, good luck. To the Mexican government, you are nothing more than a demographic threat. But hold on for a second, because there's more. According to the previously mentioned law, being an immigrant in Mexico is a felony. This means that at any moment a federal agent can request your documentation. And if you don't have that documentation, you can be forced to leave the country and pay a fine of 2 months' average salary in Mexico. Okay, so now you might be thinking, well, every country gets to determine its own immigration policy, right? Well, that's absolutely right, and until 2010, no other government complained about Mexico's immigration policy. In 2010, something happened that embarrassed the entire nation.
Arizona Governor Jan Brewer on Friday signed the state's immigration bill into law. It is considered to be among the toughest legislation in the nation.
As ironic as it sounds, Arizona law, which was meant to stop immigrants from Mexico, was a copy of that same Mexican law. But actually, in practice, it was slightly less extreme. For example, while Arizona's government considers it to be a felony to be an illegal immigrant, it doesn't really matter because Arizona's state law doesn't apply to the federal government. So the reality was the federal police could do nothing. Nevertheless, this law caught the attention of the world's media, and the president back then, Felipe Calderón, didn't remain silent.
Toda regulación que se centre en criminalizar.
Every regulation that criminalizes immigration, a social phenomena, an economic phenomena, every law that penalizes it is an opening of the door for intolerance, hate, and discrimination.
And well, there you have it. Since that day, dictionaries next to the word hypocrisy have started including a picture of Felipe Calderón. And quickly following this statement came the world's reaction. The Mexican government were forced to change that population law that we mentioned. This meant that immigration to Mexico was no longer a felony. But do hold on there for just 1 second, because that is not the end of our story. Yes, it is true that Mexico changed its immigration law, but it didn't do so entirely. Remember when I said that the Mexican federal police can request the documentation of any person at any time? Well, that is still happening today. Today, in the United States, the authorities need to suspect you of committing a crime if they want to ask you for documentation. This means it's not very easy for them to stop you on the street and arrest you for being an illegal immigrant. Meanwhile, down in Mexico, this is happening every single day. Add to this the limited control that the country have over their own police force, and you get stories like this one.
To escape deportation, migrants often pay bribes to INM agents of between $30 and $300.
And of course, the mass deportations of Central American immigrants remain exactly the same. But do you really think that Mexico is the only place where this is happening? Because the answer is absolutely not. Now, normally when we talk about immigration, we're normally talking about people who are living in a poor country moving to a rich country. But the truth is that in 2015, over 80 million people moved from one poor country to another poor country. They were just moving to a poor country that is slightly better off than their original country. As an example, every year thousands of people move from Bangladesh to India, and the authorities don't exactly welcome them with open arms. Just consider what Narendra Modi said, the Indian president, when he was running for office.
You can write it down. After May 16th, these Bangladeshis better be prepared with their bags packed.
This is really a big difference when compared to the immigrant-friendly policies of countries like Canada or New Zealand, which, by the way, are some of the wealthiest countries in the world. But this is just our opinion here at Visualpolitik, and we would love to know what you think. Do you think that Europe and the United States should follow examples set by countries like Mexico and India, or follow the examples of countries like Canada and New Zealand? Let us know in the comment section below this video. We'd love to know what you think. Also, if you enjoyed this video, please do click that like button below, and don't forget to subscribe for brand new videos every Monday and every Thursday, and I'll see you next time.